Hey, did you know that after a certain age, you start to accumulate zombie cells or senescent cells in your body that cause inflammation and harm some of the healthy cells around them? This leads to even more cells turning to zombie cells or senescent cells, and this causes you to age faster. These senescent cells have been identified as one of the hallmarks of aging, of which there are 9 at the moment. So what can you do about these senescent cells or zombie cells? Turns out that there are a few lifestyle activities that you can do now, plus there's a natural supplement that you can take that will help your body reduce the number of these senescent or zombie cells. Check out this important interview with Dr. Nick Bitz to learn about these cells and how you can get rid of them. Hello and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Nick Bitz, who's a naturopathic physician that specializes in Ayurvedic medicine. He's a leading voice in the natural products industry and currently serves as Senior VP of Product Development at Neurohacker Collective. His areas of expertise include nootropics, anti-aging medicine, biohacking, herbology, nutrition, and dietary supplements. As we get started, just know that for any listeners of this podcast, you can get 15% off your purchase of any Neurohacker products using the code Anti-Aging Hacks. With that said, Dr. Nick, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Faraz, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So this is a very exciting topic, which we're going to be talking about today. That is Senolytics. But before we get started, please tell the audience, give us your background of who you are, how you got involved in formulations, Ayurveda, anti-aging, and Neurohacker.
Yeah, long story short, I guess, by training, I'm a naturopathic physician. I graduated from a university called Bastyr, which is one of the oldest naturopathic medical schools in the U.S. I was always on the course to get my conventional medical degree. However, when I was up in Seattle, discovered naturopathic medicine and always had a deep love for botanical medicine, nutrition. And, I knew that was really lacking from the core curriculum of most medical schools. And so I naturally gravitated towards integrative and natural medicine. And that really became my life's course. During that process, I discovered Ayurveda, which is the traditional form of healthcare from India. It's considered the mother of all medicines. And there's so many reasons why I love that. But I mostly love it because it works. It's very simple. It's based upon universal truths. It works with botanicals, it works with nutrition, it works with personalized medicine, looking at body types and matching body types with specific foods, specific botanicals to bring balance. And so intuitively, the medicine just makes a lot of sense. And I've seen it work miracles in clinical settings. I use it on a daily basis and get a lot of value from that. And so that informs really how I see the world. After I finished my residency in Vail, Colorado, I moved out to Los Angeles and started working in the dietary supplement space. I grew up in Colorado. I was working in natural health food stores. So I was repping a lot of the dietary supplement brands from early on. And so I had a deep passion there for these brands. I saw a lot of potential, although at that time, dietary supplements were not widely used. But I knew that they would be in time. I knew they would be accepted. I knew people would get turned on to them. And that certainly is the case now. But in 2009, I moved into the industry and started formulating. I've worked in various companies throughout the industry, formulated a lot of products that you can find, at Sprouts Market, Whole Foods Market, Costco, pretty much anywhere in any retail brick and mortar store in the U.S. presently. A lot of products are mine that I formulated. And now I'm working with a brand called Neurohacker Collective. Really have respected this brand since their inception, which was about 2015, 2016. They are deep into nootropics and anti-aging science. And so I thought not only did they have the prettiest bottles and the prettiest product and labels that out there, I thought they had some of the most complex and interesting formulations in the marketplace. So I've been there now for what's approaching almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. One of the things, or two of the things we have in common is that both of us lived in Colorado and in Los Angeles. And so that's great to hear. And yes, you're right. I've heard about Neurohacker for many years. And I think that the team that's doing the scientific research and formulations is a pretty good, solid team. And so let's talk about Ayurveda. You said you have a lot of supplements that are in health food stores currently that you've formulated. How do you bring Ayurvedic principles, Eastern medicine, personalized medicine into these supplements? And how does that shape your approach?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's as simple as, introducing ashwagandha into the mainstream. That's an easy explanation. I think when you get a little bit deeper below that level, it's about creating products that are balanced. And so when you're introducing ashwagandha as an example, which is now widely used through, pretty much by everybody knows the term ashwagandha. And in and of itself, it's really beneficial, but it has certain energetic properties that you need to balance with other nutrients, other botanicals, to make sure that you're not generating too much heat or you're not making it too stimulating. And so there's ways to do that, just simply by looking at the energetic properties of what you're using. And so it doesn't always have to be an Ayurvedic botanical. It could be a Western botanical. Western botanicals have energetics as well. And so Ayurveda has done a good job of really cataloging all of the energetic properties of all botanicals from all traditions. And so I'm definitely trying to incorporate a lot of those energetic properties into the formulations.
Okay, great. All right, let's jump right into it. This is an anti-aging show. And so we want to discuss all the ways that we can slow down and reverse the aging process. The audience on this show is aware that we are making big strides. We are going to be making big strides this decade and the next decade in terms of actually reversing aging. And for now, as much as we can, slow down the aging process and reverse it a little bit is very welcome. And so let's start by discussing the 9 hallmarks of aging. Would you describe that for the audience, please?
Yeah, it's a great place to start. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of theories about why we age. However, not one theory can really fully nor comprehensively explain the aging process. And so as a result of this, scientists have really relied on combining different theories to create a larger theory. And so the hallmarks of aging is just that. It's a combination of 9 different theories brought together as kind of a leading talking point for why we age. And so really this idea comes from a landmark 2013 paper. It's easily the most cited article in aging literature to date. But it really describes these 9 mechanisms of aging. And these 9 mechanisms are not diseases per se. Really, they are these underlying processes that drive the aging process. And we could certainly do a deep dive on each and every one. I'm sure we could talk for 60 minutes on each of them. It is worth pointing out, though, that there was a summit in Copenhagen in March of 2022, where scientists not only talked about the 9 hallmarks, but they actually talked about other new hallmarks. And so after that convention, they proposed 5 more hallmarks. So I think we're actually going to see 14 hallmarks here probably in the coming months. And so some additions would be around inflammation and microbiome disturbances, which aren't currently on those 9 hallmarks of aging.
Okay, that's great. So let's dive into, as you said, we could talk for hours and days on each of these hallmarks, but we want to address cellular senescence in this podcast. So if you would, please describe what cellular senescence is to the audience. I'm sure some of them have heard about it and Senolytics, but let's get that out of the way so we can discuss some more questions that I have.
Yeah, cellular senescence sounds incredibly technical. It's not, in essence. Cellular senescence is, in short, it's a response to damage in the body. And so there are certain hallmarks that lead to damage. And then as a result of that damaged cell, a cell goes through senescence. And senescence has its root in the Latin word senex. That means to grow old. And so senescence really is kind of the process of growing old. And so cellular senescence then is the process by which cells individually, they grow old and they stop dividing in the body.
Mhm.
And, cellular senescence isn't really inherently bad nor good. It's a healthy, normal process that really all cells undergo. And we have 37 trillion cells in the body. And so they are all going through this process. They are born, they grow, they mature, they get damaged, they repair themselves, and eventually they stop dividing. And when they stop dividing, the body usually will try to clear those cells from the body. And, most of the time, the body does a really good job of clearing these old, dead, non-dividing cells. However, these cells can become problematic when they linger inside the body, inside tissues. And this is really what drives the aging process and wreaks havoc, really, on the microenvironment inside our tissues throughout the body. And so these senescent cells, in short, they end up taking up space inside tissues, and they're not functional. And so they're really just persisting. They're lingering, they're hanging out in tissues, and they're not doing anything. They are, though, secreting harmful inflammatory chemicals. And so they are creating an inflammatory, harmful, problematic kind of microenvironment around themselves. And these senescent cells accumulate over time. So these cells really just get lodged into the body, and the body has an inability to get rid of them. And so, ultimately that brings up the question, how do we eliminate these lingering cells?
Yeah, that's a great definition of these. And like you said, some injury or damage to cells, or just the act of the cells stopping the division process, which we believe it's 50 divisions per cell right now. Once that's done, it's supposed to go away and the body should clear it out. But for some reason, they stick around and they become like grumpy old men, and they release these inflammatory markers into the tissue as well as the bloodstream. And for what I understand is it could become a systemic issue too, because these senescent cells can release these inflammatory markers into the bloodstream, and they can affect cells that are very far away from their physical location. So not only is it a local problem in the tissue, but also a systemic problem in the body, correct?
Yeah, you're spot on. And again, the science here, it's really early days. And so I think we're learning more and more about this. We certainly know that these cells can spread like wildfire locally, but they do work systemically as well. And those chemicals obviously get lodged into the microcirculation, and they cause negative effects throughout the entire body. And so senescent cells are, for this reason, they're referred to as zombie cells, because they're dead, but they don't die. But then they're converting other healthy cells throughout the body into senescent cells through these harmful chemicals.
Yeah, I think everybody's watched enough zombie movies to know how that's not a good situation for any of us. Okay, so the body then has natural ways of getting rid of these. I believe most cells can commit suicide themselves using a process called apoptosis. If that machinery doesn't work, then the immune system can step in and get rid of these cells. But for some reason, these cells are sticking around and even outnumbering or outmatching the immune system's ability to get them out of the body, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we have figured out, fortunately, how they persist. And that really is the Achilles heel of these cells, which is fantastic. It's both the problem and the solution. And in short, they work through SCAP networks, which is a technical term, but it means senescent cell anti-apoptotic pathways. And so they're basically these pro-survival proteins that these senescent cells are upregulating, and they shield that cell from the process of apoptosis, which, as you mentioned, apoptosis really is programmed cell death, and it's how cells essentially self-destruct over time. And so they have an inability to go through apoptosis, which then means that they persist. And so we know then that if you can get in there and disrupt that SCAP network, those pro-survival proteins, you can impact that senescent cell. You can move it back into its normal life cycle, and it gets basically it gets turned on in terms of apoptosis, and the body then will eliminate that cell.
Great. And when you come to these SCAP networks, is there just one or two SCAP networks, or there are multiple of these that we have to go after with Senescence or Senolytics?
Yeah, great question. There are multiple, and in part, that is why senescence and cellular senescence is so challenging, because if there was one SCAP network, it would be very easy to study that, determine how to best get in there and disrupt that network. But because senescent cells are so heterogeneous, they have different phenotypes, they upregulate different proteins to shield themselves. If you give it a senolytic compound that goes in there and disrupts it, it's not going to change all of the senescent cells throughout the body. It may impact a subset that have certain types of SCAP networks, but certainly not all SCAP networks.
Interesting. And so it's also scientists and researchers have to think about how powerful the drug can be that disrupts these SCAP networks, because presumably some of these SCAP networks are also being used in normal, regular cells that we don't want to get rid of, right? So it's a very interesting dance that we have to accomplish to get rid of the bad guys while not harming the good guys.
Yeah, you're spot on. And in part, this is why scientists are using intermittent dosing. And intermittent dosing basically just means hit and run approach, where you're doing big doses of certain compounds for a very short amount of time, and then you're allowing the body to rest and recover. And so when it comes to senolytics, which are any compound that can help facilitate apoptosis or the elimination of senescent cells, the idea is that you want to use these compounds in very short, intense timeframes. And the studies show that using senolytic compounds in this intermittent fashion is actually much more effective, both from a safety aspect as well as an efficacy standpoint for decreasing senescent cells, than doing a continuous everyday dosing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have some questions for you around that as well. And, this space, Senolytics, is very, very hot when it comes to biotech firms that are getting a lot of funding. There's more than a dozen firms that are going after this, from a pharmaceutical small molecule approach, and they've gotten funding. They did have one notable failure, which was a couple of years ago, or recently actually, with Unity Biotechnology that is funded by Jeff Bezos. Their phase 2 trial failed, which was unfortunate and a setback in the field. But they're all going through it using a small molecule, which presumably helps them protect the investment and make billions of dollars on the back end. So that's another incentive for them. But you guys are going to it, triggering or removing or going after these SCAP networks using an all-natural approach. And as you said, it's some bolus dosing for a couple of days in a month, and then you wait for a month before you do it again.
Yeah, the studies to date are not always on synthetic or pharmaceutical ingredients. There's a lot of science on these natural compounds that shows that they have senolytic potential. Mm-hmm. And so we've really did a deep dive as a team into the science, looking at which molecules appear to be the most potent in this area, and really tried to mirror some of the research in that area. And so, as an example, if we look at two ingredients that are in there that are probably the most well-known for senolytic properties, one is quercetin. Mm-hmm. And quercetin is a really beautiful yellow flavonoid that's found in onions, broccoli, kale, widely used as an antihistamine and anti-inflammatory. It's poorly absorbed. So it's important to get around that poor absorption bioavailability issue in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. But there are studies, at a dose that we're using in our products, which is about 1,000 milligrams, to show that quercetin is very effective as a senolytic. But again, it's not effective in every tissue, nor does it impact all of the SCAP networks. And so it is important to combine senolytics to get the greatest effect. Mm-hmm. Fisetin is probably the hottest senolytic ingredient that's out there right now. Yeah. And much like quercetin, most of the studies now are using fisetin, and we know the dose that works quite well. The study dose is 20 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, which equates to about 1,400 milligrams in a healthy adult. And so if you can give that dose, you know that you're going to get a pretty hard-hitting senolytic effect in the body.
Yeah, that's great. And, we talked about what these senescent cells are actually doing. They're basically releasing pro-inflammatory factors into the skin, the tissues, as well as the bloodstream. And there's other things they're doing too. But if we just target the downstream effects of that, meaning the inflammation, then there's things you could do with curcumin, fish oil, and others that can get rid of the inflammation. But like with an Ayurvedic approach, you've got to go after the source of the problem, because nobody in their later years can just use curcumin to get rid of senolytics or handle or deal with the problems with senescent cells, or deal with the problems that they pose. So we've got to go after that pathway as well. And interesting, what I did see in your formula is that you do have curcumin. So you are targeting the inflammatory pathway there as well.
Yeah, in part. Curcumin is a very pleiotropic molecule. It does a lot of different amazing things within the body, but it does enter the brain very effectively. And so we, being a nootropic company at Neurohacker Collective, we always have at least some emphasis on brain health. And so adding curcumin, then we know that it actually will get into the brain tissue itself and help to impart that senolytic activity. And so we thought it would be additive to that. Not only is that downstream in terms of its impacts on inflammation, but it does have direct senolytic activity and hopefully in the brain too. And so that's the thinking there.
Yeah. That was one of my questions for you actually is, a lot of cells in our body have turnover, frequent turnover, but for the brain cells, it doesn't seem like they're turning over very much, even during our entire lifetime. And so with so little turnover in the brain cells, the question becomes, they're still aging. And so how do you, one, prevent the aging process, prevent their death, and also use any senolytic ideas or approaches to help the brain cells as well? And it looks like that is what you're targeting with the curcumin.
Yeah, and neurons are a subset of cells that do not turn over, to your point. Most cells, the 37 trillion cells in the body, they do turn over, they go through apoptosis, but neurons, generally speaking, do not. There's some emerging science that is leading us to believe otherwise, but right now I would say that neurons do not turn over. And so you got to take care of the neurons that you do have. However, the cells around neurons do turn over and they do become senescent over time. And so it is important to encourage apoptosis and the elimination of those cells and to regenerate that tissue to make sure that you're getting maximum benefit in terms of brain health, looking at memory, looking at mood, the ability to learn, and all of those things.
Okay, great. One of the reasons why people believe that the Unity Biotechnology phase 2 trial failed is because they were injecting knees, arthritic knees in this case, with their senolytic drug, which they developed. And some folks were saying it's more, you shouldn't go after this locally. Senolytics should be applied systemically or orally so they can get to the entire body, because cells all around the knee, but also in other places, can cause these inflammatory factors that can then, travel through the bloodstream and come to the knee. What is your perspective, Dr. Nick, on systemic versus, and I know your approach, but systemic versus just having a very localized approach when it comes to senolytics?
Yeah, a systemic approach definitely is much better. To me, it's more intuitive, it's more natural. It just makes sense. It's how we've consumed these things for ages, these compounds for ages. And so, of course, I align myself with that. I think injection is definitely high force. We do know through animal studies that if you transplant even one senescent cell into healthy knee joints of mice, it does change the structure and function of those knee joints. And so it leads to the erosion of cartilage. It leads to joint pain. It decreases function, really impacts the whole microenvironment. And because those cells, again, secrete those inflammatory SASP molecules, they can impact and shift all of the cells in that environment within the knee. And so the thinking is that, even one senescent cell among, maybe 20,000 healthy cells can wreak havoc in every tissue throughout the body. And so I think getting at it locally, directly through injection is one way to go. But I think it's much better to give the body the nutrition that it needs in ways that it's used nutrition traditionally.
Got it. Okay. So talk to us about how you and your team came up with this formula. What does the research process look like? What kind of testing do you do?
Yeah, we come at formulation differently than most supplement companies. We take a complex science approach to formulation, and so we're not looking at what's the latest, coolest ingredient out there. We are looking at what is a problem that's out there in the universe that needs a solution that actually works. And so we study that problem. We're looking at all of the different pathways, the physiology, the causes that lead to that problem. And then we start layering on the solution on top of that. And that does take a lot of time. We do invest a lot of time and money into the R&D process. Ultimately, we are running studies on all of our products before we go to launch, which is quite unique in the marketplace. Yeah. You don't see a lot of brands doing that.
Totally. And I think that's what sets you guys apart in a way from many other companies. Okay. So let me ask you this question, very practical for people that might be listening to this show. At what age should people start using Senolytics? Because once you start, you shouldn't stop, I don't believe, right?
I think it's open to interpretation. We know that the older you are, the more senescent cell burden you have. There's no doubt. We accumulate senescent cells over time as we age. And so, I would generally say anybody over the age of 40 should seriously consider looking at Senolytics. I think that it would be impactful on multiple levels. However, with that said, if I knew about Senolytics in my 20s, I certainly would have taken them. I don't see any harm in that. I do think that they can help just maintain youthfulness and healthy cell function throughout the body. But I do use my body as a lab. I do test a lot of different protocols and diets and nutrients to see how I react with them. So that may not be suitable for everybody. Just generally speaking, I would say anybody over the age of 40, I think it's a good idea to do at least one, if not a few rounds of a Senolytic product.
I see. So you could theoretically do one or, do it for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months and then pause for a little while. You don't have to do it month over month.
No, I mean, again, it's early days. And so we haven't figured out exactly the best protocol. I mean, recommendation right now is to do it 1 time per month. It's akin to a water fast or a detox protocol. It's very short in duration. It's not an everyday thing. So you don't need to worry about adding more pills to your protocol. It's a very short, just 2-day protocol. You could do it every single month safely and effectively, or you could do it seasonally, every quarter as an example, or maybe you just do it every spring, just to kind of help the body eliminate these old cells, much like trees getting rid of the old yellow leaves. And I think it's really up to you how you want to use them. I know we've launched this product, I'm going to say 4 months ago, with a fantastic reception. It's now the number 2 product in our lineup quickly. Wow. And I've now done 4 rounds of the product, and I found it to be quite helpful. So,
in terms of, for the biohackers out there that like to measure everything, in terms of what you see or feel differently, is there, again, it's early science, but is there some expectation that you should feel a different way, or you should expect something else in your blood test or biomarkers? Or how does somebody kind of look at this from a what's changing in my body standpoint?
Yeah, great question. There is no single test that can evaluate our senescent cell burden, nor really tell us whether we're decreasing our senescent load.
Yeah.
So with all that said, unfortunately, I think in time we're going to get there, but right now we don't have that. I certainly think that it can impact a range of blood measures. However, when we designed our pilot study for this product, we looked at much more broader outcomes, and we looked at kind of the functional effect. And so we always look at, how does this product improve performance? How does it make people better? Sure. And what we found at a very broad level was super validating. We did 3 different cycles of this product. All of the study participants had some level of discomfort in their joints, and they had some issue with the activities of daily living, the basic things like getting up from a chair, walking around, brushing your teeth, really basic things. So they all had a little bit of joint issue to start. Tolerability was excellent. We found that over the course of those 3 cycles, on average, they reported a 50% decrease in difficulty in performing those activities of daily living, and a 50% decrease in occasional stiffness in joints. And so, that's validating from us, because it shows that it has this broad effect in the body. And joint is an obvious one. There's been a lot of science on Senolytics, on their impact in joint function and structure. And so I think that's one area where people can see benefit. Obviously, the most benefit or most visible area of the body is the skin. And we do know that senescent cells hugely contribute to skin function and structure as we age. And so they're deeply implicated in saggy skin, dryness, wrinkles, and such. And so you can and may see an improvement in skin over time. But I think it's deeply variable. It really depends on where the individual is accumulating their senescent cells. And that literally could be in any tissue inside the body.
Yeah, totally. And as Dr. Nick said, these are still early days for this. So if you're going to try the Senolytics, make sure to go with a firm that's done, or a company that's done a lot of research, that stands behind its products, that's been in the market for a long time. And Neurohacker certainly fits that bill. Now, in terms of anything else you can do, let's say you're taking it once a month for 2 days. Are there any other lifestyle or dietary recommendations that you should follow side by side in those 2 days, or around those 2 days, or separate from those 2 days that you would recommend?
Well, when you look at lifestyle ways to decrease senescent clearance, we do know there are some things that are effective. Exercise is probably number one, but it's probably only mildly senolytic. But studies do show, especially human studies, do show that it can reduce biomarkers of senescent cell burden. So continue to exercise, but again, not to the point of exhaustion, not like running a marathon, which can suppress your immune system and in turn suppress your body's ability to get rid of those senescent cells. And so moderate everyday exercise is a good idea. We do know that a fasting mimicking diet can be very beneficial. There really isn't any science showing this quite yet, but a lot of the big minds in the field of senescence theorize that fasting, or a fasting mimicking diet using low calorie diet over the course of several days, can prime senescent cells for elimination from the body. Of course, immune support, I think, would make a lot of sense. So anything that strengthens the immune system overall can be beneficial, just to help the body clear it through the immune system overall. So things like beta glucans are fantastic for building immune strength. Obviously, vitamin D, zinc, black garlic, mushrooms, probiotics, all of those things I think can be extremely beneficial. And then lastly, I'll just mention, when you look at diet too, making sure that you're really balancing your blood sugar levels. It looks to be very important in the area of senescence. And so we know that hyperglycemia promotes senescence. And we're not really sure why it does, but it does. And so making sure that you're balancing your blood sugar on a daily basis is critically important.
Okay. Love all those recommendations. Thank you. The one thing that some of these companies are starting to look at when it comes to boosting your immune function, because immune cells, if they're programmed correctly, and I say programmed, and I'll explain why, they can get rid of the senescent cells. And what some researchers have found that there's different surface or a larger quantity of surface proteins of a particular type on senescent cells. And so there's a theory that if we just programmed immune cells to go after that surface protein, we'd get rid of the senescent cells. But again, there's danger there because these surface proteins, even though in smaller quantities, can exist on regular cells. So now we might take out the good guys when we're trying to take out the bad guys. So again, you got to be careful with some of this stuff. And so go with the companies that are doing the research. And I would say do the natural approaches right now. Don't try to jump on the biotech bandwagon right away. Okay, so how does, I guess, in terms of these interventions that Senolytics is one and others, how do you see this melding into with your Ayurvedic principles or aligning with the Ayurvedic principles in your background, the Senolytic approach that you have?
Yeah, if I frame Senolytics in a larger context, especially within like the Ayurvedic context, I think there's a lot of overlap. Honestly, I think of Senolytics as almost a cellular detox, and I think detoxing is a foundational aspect of any traditional form of medicine, and of course Ayurveda. They have a form of detox called Pancha Karma. Pancha means 5, karma means action. And so there are 5 actions that these physicians or practitioners use to eliminate certain parts of the body. And so again, senescent cells, you're trying to eliminate on a daily basis as well. So I do think that there's a lot of overlap there, but what's really exciting for me is really how cutting edge Senolytics is. It's not old. I think that it certainly can be grounded in these old philosophies, but I think it's just at the edge of that fireball of evolution and anti-aging science. And that for me is what's so exciting because it is so brand new.
Totally. I believe from what I've heard, there's 2 areas of biotech or anti-aging research that are getting a lot of the money. One of them is cellular reprogramming, and the second one is Senolytics. So the future is bright, and as exposure grows around using these latest technologies and bleeding edge technologies to slow down the aging, I think that we will all benefit in living younger and more prosperous lives, and being fully able to do whatever we want to do for a longer time. Now, what are the other, I guess, products that Neurohacker produces that you want to talk about? What's the number one most selling product?
Oh, it's a product called Qualia Mind. That's really our flagship product. It's what everybody knows us for, mostly in the industry. A really robust formulation, lots of ingredients. It pushes a lot of different pathways, and it has a lot of different benefits. It is a multi-capsule product. So it's giving you a lot of ingredients, but the impact that it has on people's lives is quite remarkable. It does a lot beyond just improving focus and concentration and memory and mood. I think it's the best nootropic stack in the marketplace. I use it daily. I get a lot of benefit from it. Helps me be more productive, more motivated on a daily basis. So that is our flagship product. We also have a product called Qualia Life. And that really is built around cellular health and aging itself, pushing a lot of different pathways that folks that listen to your show probably know about. NAD plus, mitochondria, pushing ATP, and introducing a lot of interesting ingredients that are really found in other products. And so love that product. It's a very felt product as well, much like Qualia Mind. And then, we have products outside of the brain and aging space as well. We do have a vision product. We have a new stress product called Resilience that has a blend of adaptogens and some other nutrients just to help the body recover from stress. We do have an immune product. And so we have a nice array of formulations. We don't build Me Too products. Really, everything that we do is quite innovative, quite unique, and again, validated through our studies that we run on all of our products.
Yeah, Great. Yeah, I can see. It appears that the neurohacker approach seems to be targeting as many pathways as is safely possible. Would you agree with that?
I would say that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, we're not pushing any pathway too hard.
Hmm.
We try to work with the minimum effective doses just so we're not overriding the body's innate intelligence, and really just to allow the body to use those nutrients to find its own balance and to normalize physiology. And so I
Hmm.
think that's an important point. If you're looking at a mood product as an example, a lot of products are designed to just push serotonin, which can be good. People can get benefit out of that, but it's not appropriate for everybody. Certainly can push serotonin pathways too heavily, lead to serotonin syndrome and such. And so we're very mindful about which pathways we're approaching and then how hard we're hitting them.
Hmm. Fantastic. Dr. Nick, this has been a great conversation. I've personally learned a lot, and I hope the audience does as well. Senolytics is an exciting, exciting field, and we're just scratching the surface in all of these pathways or hallmarks of aging. And I hope that we make significant progress. I know that we will in this decade and the next. So the future is very bright. And if anybody's interested in getting the Senolytics product or other products from Neurohacker, make sure to put in the code anti-aging hacks to get 15% off of your order. So, Dr. Nick, thank you very much for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks.